Hi, my name is Mitch Braff, and I'm the founder of JPEF, the Jewish Partisan Educational Foundation. We teach the history and life lessons of the approximately 30,000 Jews who fought as partisans during World War II. Tens of thousands of educators around the world use our free educational material, impacting millions of young people annually. Nearly every major Holocaust organization in the world also uses our resources. Today, we are celebrating our 20th year. It is my pleasure to introduce JPEF's board chair, our president, Elliott Ellison.
Thanks, Mitch. It's an honor to be here today. Some of you may not know what a Jewish partisan is, so let me explain. During the Holocaust, approximately 30,000 Jews, many of them teenagers like my father and uncle, escaped concentration camps, ghettos, and killing fields, and either joined pre-existing resistance groups or in some cases formed their own. These armed resistance groups were called partisans, and they were active in at least 10 European countries during World War II. Today, we are honoring their memories during our virtual Yom HaShoah V'HaGevurah Commemoration. Yom HaShoah V'HaGevurah was begun in Israel in the 1950s to honor the memories of the 6 million Jews who were murdered, as well as those who were able to fight back. Imagine the difficulty in choosing one day to represent all facets of the Holocaust. Rather than choosing a date that coincided with a particular massacre or ghetto liquidation, Israel chose a date that represented Jewish resistance, the 27th of Nisan, to coincide with the start of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the most seminal act of Jewish armed resistance during the Holocaust. This commemoration represents two aspects of the Holocaust: the darkness of loss, the Shoah, and the corresponding strength and heroism of all those who resisted in every possible way, the Gevurah. Today, we are living in a COVID-19 environment. It is preventing us from normally being together in person for commemorations like this and impacting so many other parts of our lives. This makes me reflect on two things. First, because we are commemorating virtually today, we are joined by people from all over the world. Usually I would be at my synagogue in San Francisco, surrounded by just people from the Bay Area. But it feels good today to be together as a global community. And second, I recognize how important it is for each of us to help one another during these difficult and challenging times by performing acts of kindness. Just like so many did during the Holocaust, we can gain inspiration from the Jewish partisans and so many others, much like our frontline medical personnel today during this pandemic, who displayed great acts of humanity by risking their lives, making sacrifices and more to help others. There were countless acts of kindness, Gemilut Chassidim, performed during the Holocaust. We must always remember and be guided by those examples. We can and must come together during this pandemic to help one another. Now I would like to introduce fellow board member Linda Johnson, who is the daughter-in-law of two partisans, Leah and Velvel Johnson, both of whom sadly are no longer with us. Linda will guide us through the memorial candle lighting ceremony. Linda?
Who perished in a planned system of human destruction. With each candle, we remember the darkness, the Shoah, but we also remember the strength, the gevurah, of the millions of people who resisted and fought back during this darkest period in our history. We light a candle in honor of the 1.5 million children whose hopes and dreams were destroyed before they were even had a chance to live. We light a candle for the untold millions for whom there is no one to mourn, whose entire families were annihilated and who lie in unmarked graves. We light a candle for those who stood upright while others were bending to an immoral will, for the righteous amongst the nations who risked everything and even gave their lives to help their fellow human beings. We light a candle for those brave soldiers who liberated the camps, who carried the dead and near dead in their arms for a kinder and more humane future, and for those who served with the Allied forces to put an end to tyranny. Today, we light a candle for the more than 30,000 Jews who fought back in armed resistance as Jewish partisans, saving thousands of lives and ensuring a future for the Jewish people. Today, we also mourn the loss. This year's JPEF Jewish partisans who passed away: Helen Levitt, Paula Berger, Leah Johnson, Rabbi Rami Cohen, and Benjamin Levitt. We light a candle for those who even now live under the yoke of oppression in places where the threat of genocide is real and ever present. Following the lessons of the Jewish partisans, we vow to speak out and take action against the oppression. Never again.
Tracy Offenheiser, a 6th grade teacher at Stockton Middle School in Illinois, has been using JPEF materials in her classroom for years. She brings the history of the Jewish partisans to life for her students through incredible, innovative projects. Her students, who are joining us today from their homes, put together a series of questions for a guest of honor, Jewish partisan Alan Small. In 1942, when Alan was just 14 years old, the German army liquidated his town of Poland. His mother insisted that he hide in the attic, imploring him, "You must survive." He was the only family member that survived that day. Over 2,500 people were murdered as well. Escaping to the forest, he went on the run and soon became a partisan fighter with a Russian brigade. The group was so anti-Semitic, he had to pretend he was a non-Jew. Alan's role as cavalry scout was one of the riskiest in the brigade. He and 2 others rode on horseback to obtain vital information for their superiors, acting as the eyes and ears on the battlefield. If trouble awaited the partisans, Alan was one of the first to see it. After the war, Alan immigrated to the United States. He served in the US Army during the Korean War and afterwards worked in New York for the fashion industry. He has 2 children, 8 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. He currently lives in Florida. Welcome, Alan and Tracy.
Okay, Alan, question 1 is, what was your life like before the war?
Well, I can only remember since the age of 5. I lived in a town. They had about 2,000, close to 2,000 Jewish people in the town. And I was going to a Hebrew school, as all the Jewish boys my age went. We had another school, a public school, and my 3 sisters went. And I had a normal childhood, I call, until the war broke out, especially in 1939, when the war broke out. The part of Poland was occupied by the German army. The other part was occupied because I lived in eastern Poland, close to the Russian border. It was occupied by the Russian army. The Russians came in, and all the schools, we went to school instead of the Hebrew school. They made it a Russian Jewish school, and life wasn't that easy because my father was a businessman prior to the war, and then the Russians didn't believe in everybody having their own business. So my father worked for the Russians, and I went back to school, which was in Yiddish and Russian. They were teaching us. And before you turn around, the Germans attacked Russia, and in 1941, June 22nd, the Russians were chased out, and the German army occupied my hometown. And after 6 weeks or whatever, it was August 1st, they made all the Jewish men from 16 to 60 to report in the main square, which was opposite my house, and I have seen everything. And they went with the help of the Polish police. But one thing I have to mention, that the Polish young guys or women that were friends with my sisters because they went to public school, they all volunteered, and joined the Nazis. And with the help of them, they went and they picked out 220 men, all the business people and the rabbinical staff and the principals from school and the teachers. And they took him about 1.5 miles from my house, and they shot him. And that was about 6 weeks after they were there. After that, the Jewish people were put in a Jewish quarter. It's a part of the town, was assigned to the Jewish people. And then they took all the Jewish people from the surrounding small towns because it was easier for them to liquidate the Jewish people, not go from town to town. And they made a ghetto in the section where I lived. And it was terrible, of course. Even I had to work, and the people were the Polish. Well, I gotta say, and I'm sorry to say that, but people that were our friends before the war, they volunteered when it came to the Jewish people. They were helped because the Germans didn't know who's Jewish, who's not Jewish, or who did what. But in that lasted till the end of the year, and till in 1942, of course, they surrounded the ghetto again, and they started liquidate people from one town to the other one. They kept us 4 days locked up in their homes, May 8th, and then May 12th, of course, they took out about 2,500 people, and while they were chasing everybody out, my mother said to me, "You must hide in the attic," and I said, "No, I want to go with you." She says, "No, hide in the attic," and that's how I survived, by hiding in the attic, and then after that, it's a long story, but I joined the partisans, and that's how I survived the war.
Thank you. We have another question yet. What went through your mind as you were fighting for your life as well as for the lives of others?
Well, the influence the rest of my life, I would say, is that it was important to me to survive, and that's what influenced my life, to survive. And it's hard for me to answer that question. The only thing I had in my mind is to survive and tell the story, what happened, and be a better person than what I have seen around me.
Alan, how could the children of today's time learn from the experiences that you had as a partisan and living through the war?
What I expect the kids to learn, that we're all equal. We're all children of God, and there's no difference between one religion to another religion. We gotta respect each other and work for a better tomorrow, because there's no reason to hate a certain people because of their religion. We are better than that. And for the kids to be good children and go to school and listen to their parents.
It is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Michael Berenbaum. Michael is a world-renowned and highly accomplished scholar. He's the original project director for the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, the editor of the Encyclopedia Judaica, a rabbi, writer, filmmaker, and professor at the American Jewish University. He's been a valued advisor since our founding. Thank you, Michael, for being here.
Thank you very much, Mitch. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I think meeting at this moment, we have a collective wish is may all of you safe and all of you remain healthy. And that's a very important contribution that we can make, not only to our own lives, but to the nation at large. I want to talk in the very brief time that we have about what we're remembering. The Holocaust was an earth-shattering event in human history. It taught us an awful lot about the nature of evil. It also taught us an awful lot about the capacity of human beings to combat evil and to achieve measures of good. The Holocaust did not begin large, it began small. It began with small gestures of discrimination, with the slow eradication of civil rights and human rights and respect for human dignity. It began with prejudice, it began with words, and it began with silence and with complicity. You heard that it didn't end that way. It ended with mass murder and killing. If you go through the history of the Holocaust, it ended with mobile killing units that went out and struck Jews, Gypsies, Soviet commissars, and murdered them one by one, bullet by bullet, town by town, village by village. When this became more difficult for the killers, they reversed the process and they took them almost in assembly line fashion. They took them from ghettos and boarded them on trains. They underwent deportation. And then they were sent to killing centers where they were dehumanized before they were destroyed. And you've all heard of gas chambers, and that was a mode almost of an assembly line factory of death. What's unique about the Jewish Partisan Education Foundation is we teach about a very unique brand of people who in the face of death decided that they had to take another way of combating death. Jews fought. They fought in the ghettos. Some of you have heard of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, but there were uprisings in a range of other ghettos. Jews fought in the forests. If your ghetto was on the edge of a forest, you could escape. You could go out into the woods. You had to endure terrible cold during the winter, heat during the summer, not a place to sleep, not a moment to remain warm. They fought in the death camps. There were uprisings at Sobibor, at Treblinka, and at Auschwitz. And they fought in partisan units in Yugoslavia, in Greece. They fought with the resistance in France. They fought alone and they fought together with other groups because they decided that in essence there was a moment at which you had to confront evil, and there's a moment at which you have to combat evil. I met many years ago, I was giving a lecture on resistance, and I said that resistance was a decision that people made with the question, what statement are you going to make by your death? And in the back of the room was a great resistance fighter by the name of Marek Edelman, who said, no, there's something else. Resistance was a decision that you made. How do you live until you die? And there is a difference. We lived, he said, as free people. And the fact is that we had the greatest freedom of all because we had already said life is not the ultimate value, at least not life under oppression. Freedom is a deeper and a more profound value. And therefore we lived as free people, being able to decide what we're going to do and what we're going to assume responsibility for. You heard from our partisan that what we expect you to do is not to remember suffering, but to remember what you do in the aftermath of suffering. The aftermath of suffering, you alleviate suffering. In the aftermath of suffering, you comfort those who are afflicted. In the aftermath of deep suffering, you bear witness. And what do we bear witness to? We bear witness to the necessity of human decency, to the assumption of human responsibility, not to become a perpetrator, not to become a victim, not to become a bystander, but to become an upstander, one who looks at evil, confronts evil, does not stand by with evil, but stands up to evil. And if we bear witness, if we essentially say that we are going to confront and combat and grapple and alleviate suffering, and we're going to heal those who are oppressed, then we become what we really have to become is an upstander. So what do I want to leave you with? I want to leave you with the sense that we all have responsibility. And the responsibility that we have is a responsibility to one another, and a responsibility not to divide each other, but to reach out to each other. I want to also leave you with one more statement. Why do we tell you this story? There was a couple, a prison foreman in Sachsenhausen, who told the people exactly what was happening, and he concluded his remarks with, "I have told you this story not to weaken you, but to strengthen you. Now it's up to you. You students are the last to live in the presence of survivors, and consequently, in a very few years, 2, 3, 5, will be gone. But our collective task is to bear witness to the witnesses." Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Michael. That was really wonderful. Thank you for being here. Cantor Shira Ginsburg is the granddaughter of Jewish partisans Judith and Milke Ginsburg and a leader of the third generation community of Holocaust survivors. She's the cantor of the East End Synagogue in New York City and is also an accomplished actress and educator. For many years, she had shared the empowering legacy of the Jewish partisans with her students, with the public, with her one-woman show, Booby's Kitchen. In 2019, JPEF honored Shira for her leadership and teaching about Jewish resistance during the Holocaust. Thank you, Shira, for being here today.
Thanks so much, Mitch. It's an honor to be here. In just a moment, I'm going to recite the El Malei Rachamim prayer. This prayer translates to mean God full of compassion. It's the traditional prayer of remembrance for the soul of the departed that is recited at all Jewish funerals, all days of remembrance, and yortzites. Its plea is that the deceased be granted menucha nechona, which means proper rest. So the version that I'm going to chant right now is written specifically for the victims of the Shoah. And if you are able to, I would ask that wherever you are, you please rise. El Malei Rachamim Shochein Mamromim Hamitzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShekhinah B'malot Kedoshim Uteorim Kizoar Harakia Mazir שישה מיליון אחינו ואחיותינו שנהרגו לקידוש השם הרחמים יזכירים בסתר כנפיו לעולמים בטרור החיים את נשמתם אדוני נחלתם וינוחו בשלום על משכבם ונאמר אמן. Amen. If you wouldn't mind standing for just a moment, I'm going to conclude my portion with the chanting of Zegna Camel, which is the anthem of the Jewish partisans. Inspired by the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, a young Vilna poet named Hirsch Glick wrote this particular song, wrote these lyrics in 1943, which very quickly became the official anthem of the Vilna partisans and spread rapidly to other ghettos, camps, and partisan groups. Its power lies in its defiant optimism, which urges the Jewish people to continue to always fight for freedom, despite the unimaginable suffering, both past and present. Sag nicht kein Mal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg, Chost Himmeln bleien etwa stillen Bläuting, Kulmin wird noch unser Reus gebänkte Schau, es wird abheugt an unser Trott mir seinen da. Von grünem Palmenland bis weißem Land von Schnee. Wir kommen on mit unser Pein, mit unser Weh. Und wo gefallen sie, spritzt von unser Blut. Sprotzen wird dort unser Gewurre, unser Mut. You must not say that you now walk the final way. Though the darkened heavens hide the blue of day, the time we've longed for will at last draw near, and our steps will sound like drums that we are here. You may be seated, and we turn back to Elliott Ellison to conclude today's ceremony.
Wow, that's all I can say. That was so beautiful, Shira. Thank you so much for that. So on behalf of the staff and board of the Jewish Partisan Educational Foundation, I want to thank Cantor Shira Ginsburg, Ellen Small, and Dr. Michael Berenbaum for their participation in our virtual Yom HaShoah V'HaGevurah Commemoration. And I'd like to thank them for their generosity in sharing their humanity with us today. Thanks to all of you for attending today, and especially all of you students who are joining us today as part of your virtual learning. If you would like to see more interviews with former partisans, see short films, download curricula, or take a free online class, please go to www.jewishpartisans.org. If you have any questions or comments, please email the JPEF office at info@jewishpartisans.org. Again, Thank you for joining us, and stay safe.